This episode of Harvey Brownstone Interviews is brought to you by the Harvey Brownstone Talk Show Blend Coffee, available at hollywoodblends.com. Everyone's saying it's the best coffee they've ever tasted. Why not give it a try and see for yourself?
Hello, everyone. I'm Harvey Brownstone, and today's guest is a renowned composer, arranger, vocalist, and pianist extraordinaire who is both a highly sought-after music director and a star performer in his own right. For 25 years, he worked closely with Liza Minnelli as her music director, collaborator, and accompanist. He's also been the music director and arranger for many other great stars, including Tony Bennett, Marilyn Maye, Lavin, Eder, and Hampton Callaway, and Christine Ebersole. In addition, he's a wonderful songwriter. He co-wrote the multi-platinum Grammy-winning #1 hit song, Does He Love You?, recorded by Reba McEntire and Linda Davis in 1993. As a solo entertainer, he performs sellout shows in concert halls and nightclubs across the country, including his highly acclaimed tribute shows to Mel Tormé and Coleman, as well as his spectacular show with Jim Caruso called the Sinatra Century. During the pandemic, he was one of the first artists to start performing online, creating his own weekly live stream show called Billy's Place, celebrating the Great American Songbook with songs and stories from his amazing career. He's recorded numerous albums, and some of my favorites are Jazz Live, Waters of March, Billy Stritch Sings Mel Tormé, The Sunday Set recorded live at Birdland, Christmas at Birdland, and Billy's Place, which is a collection of his favorite songs from those online shows I just mentioned. He's also been prominently featured on at least a dozen other albums by music artists like Christine Ebersole, Jim Caruso, Benny Carter, Clea Blackhurst, and many more. And if all that weren't enough, our guest is also a Broadway star. He played the role of Oscar in the Tony Award-winning 2001 Broadway revival of 42nd Street. And when he's not on tour, he can often be found dazzling New York audiences on Sunday nights at Bemelman's Bar at the Carlisle, and of course, every Monday night at Birdland for Jim Caruso's cast party. I'm delighted to welcome the brilliant Billy Stritch to our show. Billy, thank you so much for being here.
Well, it's my pleasure. I don't think we need to go any further. I think you've mentioned everything in that introduction.
Well, that's because I'm a bit of a fan stalker, to be honest. Now, yeah. I read that as a kid growing up in Texas, you were absolutely obsessed with music, especially the great standards. Is it true that your exposure to those songs came from variety shows like the Carol Burnett Show?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think the first time I ever heard George Gershwin music and things like that, where, Carol Burnett, you would always usually spend the last segment of her show would be some big, either a tribute to an old movie that was comedic, or it would be like a big long medley with Stephen Eder or with different Donald O'Connor, different people. And that was my way into the Great American Songbook. Gershwin, especially, I remember they did a Gershwin tribute, and I just loved it. And I think my grandmother kind of picked up on that. And so for my birthday the next year, I got she gave me the Gershwin songbook, which I still have. And it was really because of those. And I don't know if you also remember the Sonny and Cher show. Cher would almost always sing an old standard, I mean, that was, I don't know whose idea that was, but it was another way in for me to hear those great songs.
Have you ever had a chance to tell Carol Burnett how much those musical sequences on her show meant to you?
I actually have. I'm sure she's heard it from a lot of people, but I actually have gotten to know her a little bit. She's super nice and friendly. I mean, she's one of those people who always responds to an email or a note. And whenever I see her in New York, our paths cross. I mean, it's one of those pinch me moments because, I've been lucky in my life to meet some of these idols and now to be on a first name basis with them is pretty incredible. Something I never dreamed would happen. So yeah, I told Carol that probably more than once.
Does it sadden you that we just don't have those great variety shows on TV anymore?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's all kind of been replaced with these competition shows. Like The Voice and America's Got Talent and things like that. And I think part of it used to be, music rights was an issue. That became a real issue in the 90s. You couldn't do a lot of these songs because it got too prohibitive, expensive. But I always find that young people, especially that are coming up, they tend to find this music, whether it's through recordings or YouTube. It's all out there. I'm always amazed when somebody young is like an Ella Fitzgerald fan or a Judy Garland fan, and it's because it's all, you somehow you find it. So anyway, it'll all come around again, I feel sure.
I sure hope so. One of your idols was Mel Tormé, and you've done a beautiful tribute show and an album in his honor. You even got to open for Mel Tormé back in the 80s when you were singing in the vocal group Montgomery, Plant, and Stritch.
Right.
Did you get to spend any time with Mel Tormé?
Well, I actually did that night, that day and that night in 1988. We opened for him at the JVC Jazz Festival at Carnegie Hall, which was unbelievable to begin with. So we went and showed up for our sound check. We were self-contained, I played the piano and it was three voices. So we didn't really use a backing band. So we came in and we did our sound check. I think we did maybe 6 or 7 songs, and we get about halfway through one song, and I'm just in awe. I'm looking up. It's Carnegie Hall. I can't believe I'm on the stage. And then I look down and my eyes land on the third row, right on the aisle, and there's Mel Tormé. I can't even believe it. And he's sitting there, and not only is he sitting there, he's listening to everything we do, which, makes you nervous. But after we ran our entire 30-minute set, and he came up on stage, and he was so generous. He actually helped us program the set. He said, that number you're closing with, that probably be better as an opener. And, he switched it around, because he had such a great sense of pacing a show. So, which he didn't have to do. And then the coda to that story is, because it was Carnegie Hall, I have my whole family and my sister and my grandmother, who was my big supporter. They all were, but my grandmother, the one that gave me the Gershwin Songbook, they all came up to see me at Carnegie Hall. And
Wow.
after the show, I brought them backstage, and there was probably 100 people there waiting to meet Mel Tormé. So we kind of waited off to the side, and I saw him across the room in his dressing room. But he was talking to his friends, and my grandmother really wanted to meet him. So I said, well, just wait patiently. We'll get to him soon. So I turn and talk to somebody else. Then I turn back, and she's gone. And I look across the room, and she made a beeline for Mel Tormé, and they're already in rapt conversation. So I was kind of embarrassed, but she wrote him a note later, a few weeks later, thanking him for meeting her and complimenting him on his new book. And he wrote her right back, and he was very complimentary about me and about meeting her. So he was a true gentleman. And then I got to meet him a couple times in LA after that. And every time he was in New York, I'd be in his audience.
That's amazing. I remember when we had Mel Tormé's son, Steve, on our show, he talked about his father's legacy and what he felt made his father such a unique artist. What is it about Mel Tormé's voice and musicianship that resonated with you so much?
Well, I mean, his voice, it's first of all, it's so completely unique. You can hear like 3 notes and you know that it's him. And, as I was coming up as a young jazz and traditional pop singer, I would always invariably have people compare me, say, don't you, there's something about my voice that reminded them of Mel Tormé's voice. So I began to explore his music, and of course, I fell in love with his music and learned a lot of songs through his recordings. And then, so it was only natural that many years down the line, after I had met him and I'd heard these comparisons, for 20, 30 years, that I would eventually do a show in tribute to him and do an album of his material. I don't imitate him at all. I mean, I wouldn't even attempt to try to sound just like him, but hopefully what I do is in honor of him and it respects his musicality.
Now, I mentioned your vocal trio, Montgomery, Plant, and Stritch, which had great success in New York and Europe until you disbanded in 1990. Was it difficult for you, Billy, to transition into being a solo performer?
Well, at the time, it felt like it was going to be very difficult. I had We had worked a lot in New York City, but I had not yet made that move. We were still based out of Texas, out of Houston. So by the time we broke up, I realized that this was the time for me to get to New York and position myself because I have made connections and I have made friends. But honestly, Harvey, it was, not a long transition. It was a lot of it was being in the right place at the right time because I worked. My friend Bob Nahas had a restaurant called Bobo's, and he had a piano bar out front. And this is a much longer story, but the upshot is that Liza Minnelli used to frequent the restaurant.
Right.
And I would go in on my nights, and he would say, "You just missed her. She was just here." Well, eventually, after about a month of that, I did happen to be there on a night that she was there. And there wasn't a lot of people in the restaurant. It was very quiet. It was early. And, instead of playing, I just had this feeling that I was going to meet her. I didn't realize the extent of the collaboration, our friendship. But instead of playing New York, New York or cabaret, like that's such a typical thing, and have the person that say, "Thank you. Thanks for playing my song," that I've heard a million times. I thought about it for a minute and I started to play this beautiful piece of music. It's the theme from a movie called The Bad and the Beautiful. And it was her father, Vincent Minnelli's, one of his movies. And I played that, and that's what got her up and across the room and over to me. And she said, "How do you know that song?" And I said, "It's from one of my favorite movies." And she said, "My father directed that movie." And I just went, "Yeah, I know." And I think she liked that. It's kind of hip that I came up with something like that, and we just connected. So, within about 3 weeks, I was creating some vocal arrangements for her show at Radio City Music Hall, and doing my own solo engagement. So it was 1991. It was a very big transitional year for me, but a lot happened, and then I was kind of on my way.
Yeah, I know. You met Liza at Bobo's when you were performing there on March 7th, 1991. You very
Right.
quickly became her music director, and you created the arrangements for Liza's big show at Radio City Music Hall and also Minnelli on Minnelli.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. I created some of those things. Her musical director at the time was her drummer, Bill Livornia, a legendary drummer. But I jumped in, I started doing arrangements, and then I would invariably play, like, open for her in shows or come out and do duets. And then somewhere down the line, I started musical directing from the piano, but it wasn't immediate. I worked in many different capacities, but I always have to give credit to Bill Livornia because he was a super great mentor for me and a fabulous conductor, and welcomed me into the family with open arms. I wanted to set the record straight.
Right. And I appreciate that. You also worked on Minnelli, which paid tribute to her father, Vincent Minnelli, and also her wonderful show, Liza's at the Palace.
Right.
My question for you is, what do you think it is about you that makes your musicality such a good fit for Liza?
Well, I think we really, have very, very similar tastes in music. She, of course, grew up, she knew Ira Gershwin. She grew up, knew Rosie Clooney, knew all those great people in Hollywood. Obviously, I didn't, but I certainly knew who all those people were. So, we had a shorthand already. She didn't have to explain things. I would invariably know what she was talking about. So we really connected on that level. We had a lot of the same frame of reference. And, we had this great musical shorthand. When I would create an arrangement for her, I always say it was always a collaboration. It was never a situation where, "Oh, here's the arrangement. I hope you like it." We would sit at the piano for hours and talk about, she would express how she wanted this chord to make her feel, what emotion she was trying to convey. It was she being the daughter of a director, expressed herself in terms of visual things. Like, "I want it to sound like a rainy day in the month of May," whatever, really specific. And I would play until I played what she liked. It was a wonderful collaboration that really developed into a very, very deep friendship as well.
Well, I would think that one of the fun things about being an accompanist for some of the singers you've worked with especially the female singers, is that you get the chance to play songs that you probably would never perform yourself, right?
Right. Yeah. Sure. Sure. I mean, I definitely I can, bring music, a lot of material to some of these ladies that, of course, being a man, wouldn't quite work on me. Although, the rules are changing all the time. You can certainly, it's just pronouns, and you can certainly change them around the way you want to. I mean, I've sang songs about she's, and I've sang songs about he's. So, you know, but it does, just the benefit the fact that I work with so many different singers, and they're all quite different from each other, means that, my knowledge and my base of musical material is pretty extensive, and it just grows all the time.
Well, you co-wrote a beautiful song for Liza called I Would Never Leave You,
Mm,
which was in her show at the Palace, which I
mhm.
was lucky enough to see. It's like a love song to her audience because the lyrics just perfectly sum up how she feels about being a performer. Can you take us back, Billy, to the moment when you played that song for her for the first time?
Well, I wrote that with Johnny Rogers, who was in the show, and we wrote it along with my with a friend named Brian Green. But I remember Johnny and I really, he's a pianist and so am I, and I remember really sitting in the room with him, and that what you just said was exactly what she said she wanted to express. She wanted to sing a love song for the audience, and she knew exactly what point in the show she wanted to go. Wanted to be very early in the show. I think it's actually the second song on the show, and it's torchy. She wanted it to be a torch song, bluesy, which she does really, really well. So I remember, playing it for her. She suggested a couple of minor musical changes, and then there's a great line at the end, here I am, the same damn dame you always knew, which I kind of question that. But when she sang it in her own voice from her point of view, it really was actually the perfect, capper to the song. So, I'm very proud of that song. Natalie Cole, bless her heart, rest her soul, who I loved, at one point told me that she loved the song and expressed interest in doing it. And of course, that never happened. But just that another singer of that caliber would hear that song and enjoy it and want to do it was pretty amazing to me.
Well, it was pretty amazing to be in the audience and feel the emotion that she was conveying to us, that gratitude. I really, really loved it. What's the most important thing you've learned from Liza?
She taught me early on by example. She said that because she surrounded herself with just fantastic collaborators. I mean, Fred Ebb, not only was a great lyricist with John Kander, and they created so much of her material, but he was her director, and he wrote most of her special material and dialogue. And she always said basically, that stage persona, that girl on stage, that came out of Fred's head. I think she doesn't give herself quite enough credit, but she always said that the key to her success was that she surrounded herself with people who knew more than she did, who she respected. And I try to do that. I always try to work with the best sidemen. I'm lucky that I'm at a point where I can kind of pick and choose the vocalists that I work with. I work with the best of the best. And I think if you're securing your own artistry, you realize that doesn't take anything away from you. That only enhances you by working with the best people, sharing the stage with the best people, collaborating with those people. There's room for all of us. So I'm always kind of mystified when performers don't want to be very generous or share. And I think that's just insecurity because, I think, it just makes you look better. And so that's the first thing I learned. And that's the one that stuck with me for sure from
Well,
Liza.
it's definitely a good lesson, not just in show business, but in every profession, I can tell you.
Yeah.
Tell me about Marilyn Maye. She's another one of these great vocalists
Yeah.
who's just a force of nature. How did she
Yeah.
come into your life?
I met Marilyn. I was still in Texas. This was way back. before I even had my vocal group. I guess I first heard Marilyn when she was working in Houston in a club called Roscoe's, which was a little supper club, but not fancy at all. And she was doing 2 shows a night or 3 shows a night, something like that. And I was already working with some singers in town. And I remember an older singer I was working with says, "You got to go hear Marilyn Maye." So I went, and Harvey, I don't even think I was legal, actually, although nobody was checking. I remember back in Texas in 1979, 80, we all had fake IDs. That doesn't fly anymore. But I remember going to this club, sitting by myself, and just being blown away by this singer who sang all this great material that I already loved, but the fact that she was a real nightclub entertainer and she played right to the audience and they were right next to her. I'd never seen that before. So I was just, in awe of her. And I went back night after night and I kind of stalked her a little bit. I followed her around. And of course, because I have good ears for picking up music, I would hear these songs night after night and just kind of learn them in my head. So about a month later, when she finally came to hear me play at some cocktail gig that I had, I invited her to get up and sing. And she goes, "Oh, honey, no, we came to hear you. I mean, you don't know my arrangements." And I started playing one of her arrangements. So that was like, she looked at me and goes, "Oh, okay." So I was 18, kind of a smart ass. But, I knew I had a talent and I knew she would appreciate it. I don't know what possessed me to come on so strong, but that was the beginning of, gosh, now I've known her 44 years. So I started working with her. It's always off and on. I haven't worked with her straight through, but from the time I was, 19, I think. So here we are, do the math.
You are a smartass in all the right ways, because
Well,
what you don't give yourself enough credit for is the talent that bursts out of you that's so evident to everyone that hears you play, including these legendary stars who've heard it all and have worked with the best.
right,
So
right. Well, thank you.
now in
Thank
my
you.
introduction, I mentioned your song "Does He Love You," which Reba took to the top of the charts. And the song won a Grammy in 1994 for Best Country Vocal Collaboration. But the song was also recorded as a duet by Liza and Donna Summer. And I
Yeah.
think Patti LaBelle sang it as well, didn't she?
Patti LaBelle did it not as a duet, which was kind of weird at the time. My co-writer, Sandy Knox, said Patti LaBelle wants to do it. They're asking permission to change the lyrics. Instead of "Does He Love You," it was going to be called "He Doesn't Love You." They had actually already recorded. I mean, I'm not going to name names, but it was a very famous producer who kind of took it upon himself to rewrite some of the lyric and go ahead and record it. And then by the time we found out about it, it was either, well, you know, if you don't want it on our album, we'll pull it from the album, but, we're not going to change it. So, we thought about it. And at the time we thought, well, it's Patti LaBelle. We heard the version, wasn't what we wrote, but it was good. It's Patti LaBelle. So we let it fly. It was not a hit. It was an album cut. She did it. I remember she did come to New York and do it in concert because I was in her audience and she did a little bit of it in concert, but it wasn't a hit for her. It's a duet. It doesn't work as a single song. It was also done on TV on The Voice. Reba and Kelly Clarkson did it. Martina McBride and Carrie Underwood, I think, did it. And then most recently, 2 years ago, it was recorded again by Reba McEntire and Dolly Parton. And it was nominated for another Grammy last year. Didn't win this time around, but to have the same song 29 years apart in Grammy contention was pretty fantastic.
Oh, it's monumental. Now, I read that you and Sandy wrote that song back in the 80s. Why did it take so long for someone like Reba to come along and turn the song into a big hit?
Well, we wrote it for my vocal group, Montgomery, Plant, and Stritch. Montgomery and Plant were 2 women. Stritch, obviously not a woman, but, we worked a lot in the gay bars. We did a lot of comedic material and some dramatic material. And this song being a duet, it's between a wife and a mistress. And it works so well in a live situation because here's the wife singing about what she knows about the mistress. And here's the mistress over here singing in this direction. And then at the big high point of the song, they turn and they confront each other. And it, of course, and the big key change and those guys went wild in that club night after night after night, and it was thrilling. And so that's how the song came about. Then your question was, how did it get to Reba? Sandy, that was 1985. Sandy, not long after that, moved to Nashville because she was very, very serious about becoming a country and pop songwriter. So she moved there to do that. She got a job as a staff writer for a small publishing company. And, when they sign you up, you kind of show them your whole catalog. So the song was demoed. It was kind of out there. Nobody was actively trying to promote it. And then in 1993, Reba was looking for a duet to do with another woman because she and her husband had a management company, and one of their clients they were trying to really promote was a girl named Linda Davis. So they were looking for a way to really get a duet for Reba and Linda. And then some guy whose name escapes me, and it shouldn't because I have him to thank. He remembered the song. He got the cassette tape. He got it to Reba. Reba listened to it in her car driving home from Nashville, driving to her big house outside of Nashville, listened to it, called and said, put a hold on that song. And, 6 weeks later, it was released. And a month after that, it was #1. So, we weren't trying to get it to anybody. I mean, honestly, before that, Barbara Mandrell was going to record it. That didn't happen. Winona Judd was going to record it. I don't know why that didn't happen, but it happened the way it was supposed to happen. But it took, 8 years.
It's amazing. You toured with Tony Bennett on one of his last concert tours. What was he like to work with?
Oh, that was a thrill to work with him. Of course, it's Tony Bennett. I mean, I had met him several times. The first time I met him actually was way back when I had the group, Montgomery, Plant, and Stritch. We were working at a hotel in Austin, Texas. Must have been about 1988. And we heard that he was staying in the hotel because he was singing at some private event in the hotel ballroom that night. And so Sharon Montgomery said, why don't we send him a bottle of champagne and see if he'll come down and hear us tonight, And so we got him a bottle of champagne and a note saying who we were. We'd love him to be our guest if he had time. So those are back in the days when we would do 3 sets a night. So we're in the middle of starting our 3rd set. Place is packed. And all of a sudden we see him come in and there's no place for him to sit. Well, this is one of these, it looked kind of like a ski lodge. So across from us, there was a big low hearth and a fireplace, stone fireplace. And he just came and sat down right in front of this little fireplace and just listened to us and was so great to us. And, so that was the first time. I met him a few times with Liza. And then the way the gig came about was that he had just turned 90. I had played at his 90th birthday celebration at Radio City. I played one song for Kevin Spacey, who was fantastic that night. And then a few days later, I'm walking the dogs in the park and a phone number comes up. Actually, it said no caller ID. And so usually that's one of 2 people that I know, that when it shows up that. So I'm expecting it to be someone else. And the voice said, is this Billy? I said, yes. He goes, it's Tony Bennett. I'm like, what? I said, yeah. And he was like, I was wondering if you might be interested in working with me. I'm like, yeah, I think I would be. Maybe we should get together in a couple of days. So he lives a block from me. He lived a block from me. So I would see him from time to time. So I went over 4 days later and we ran through 2.5 songs. And he stopped in the middle of the 3rd song. I said, I think that's perfect. Let's do it. So 10 days later, I was working with him, and it was really quite a whirlwind. It was 11 months. It wasn't a long time, but it was quite a whirlwind of time. It was a great experience. We went to some great places, and, it's a wonderful thing to be able to say you did. It was great.
Well, one of those places you went to was Toronto.
Yeah.
And I got to sit in the 3rd row. And if someone had told me then, I was still a criminal court judge then, But if someone had told me then that I'd get to interview you now, I would never have believed it. I'm just
Oh,
listening to you talk. I've been to so many of the shows you've talked about. And another person I absolutely adore, who we recently had on the show, is Christine Ebersole. You just completed a fabulous run of shows at 54 Below. When she was on the show, we talked about the wonderful albums that you made together, In Your Dreams and Sunday in New York. I believe you made both those albums with her.
that's right. Yeah, I
Now,
did.
and then you've just completed these shows in New York with her. What's it like to work with that woman and that unbelievable voice?
It's just great. I, I, she's very, very special. I met Christine in 2001. Early in that year, we had both been cast in the Broadway revival of 42nd Street, which played at the Ford Theater, which is now something else. But anyway, she was cast as Dorothy Brock. I was cast as Oscar. We joke about it. I said I was cast in the small but pivotal role of Oscar, the rehearsal pianist. That which always gets a laugh. And there were 54 people in the cast, but we were really drawn to each other. We didn't work together then, but there were some period, on stage. There's a scene in Act Two at the Regency Club, and I play a little bit downstairs. I'm playing at and then she picks up the song upstairs, and so we didn't really have any scenes together. But the point is, okay, I there's something so wonderful about her. First of all, she has the best laugh in the world. It's just this
Yeah.
mellifluous, very joyful, buoyant, you know, unpretentious. It's just such a natural sound. It's like melody. And I would go into that show sometimes. I was there for almost a year and a half. And, as it goes on, do I have to go? It's Sunday afternoon, I would sometimes not feel my best. And I would walk in there and I'd go to my dressing room and when I would hear her laugh and it would just make me laugh. It would make me happy. So we bonded over that period of time. And then 3 years later, our mutual attorney, Mark Sendroff, said, you guys really ought to do an act together. You really ought to work together. I mean, and he was right. Christine was booked at Feinstein's, which at that time was at the Regency Hotel. And we got together and, we within working on like two or three songs. Again, it was like, the Tony Bennett thing. She said, well, yeah, let's work together. It's perfect. So that was 20 years ago. Actually, next month, January of this new year, will be 20 years since we started doing a nightclub act together. And she makes me so happy. No one makes me laugh as much as she does. Again, it's a great musical collaboration, which I love. I love to sit down with the performer, sit at the piano and bounce ideas back and forth. That's what's so much fun for me. And that she's all about that. So we haven't had a chance to work together too much in the last few years, but this last week that we did at 54 Below was kind of a homecoming. And we've sworn to each other that we're going to do much more in the next year. So get ready.
That is very good news to hear. I want to tell you, it's not just her laugh. She cried during the interview on my show because she became overcome with emotion when we talked about the people she'd worked with, the many amazing projects she'd worked on, and the gratitude she feels for the gift of her voice and for the gift of the audience she has. And I was so moved by someone of her stature who still can feel gratitude to the extent that it actually made her cry.
Well, she's very connected to her emotions, and she's she's very spiritual. She definitely believes in a higher power, and it's all a gift, and that she's a vessel to bring, her talent through that comes from somewhere else. I tend to believe that as well. Maybe that's another reason we get along so wonderfully. But yeah, she does wear her emotions on her sleeve, and music can move her, and the situation in the world can move. I mean, I've seen, she can get sad and she can get happy sad. All the emotions. She's not afraid to express it, and I think that's part of what makes her so wonderful. She's not guarded. She really is, what you see is what you get, and she's very, very open with her feeling, and I think that makes her such a wonderful performer.
Oh, for sure. I mean, that woman's heart is full. And you mentioned Mark Sendroff. We also had him on our show. It's amazing how many people you're talking about that I've met or worked with.
Well, it's a small little world up here in New York, down here in New York. It's we all kind of know each other. So, but yeah, he's worked with everybody,
Oh,
right?
he's an amazing human being. Well, we recently had our mutual friend, Debbie Wileman, on our show,
Hmm.
who, in my opinion, I'm just going to say it, I think she's the greatest Judy Garland impressionist since Judy Garland herself.
I
And
agree.
what I really love about your connection with her, a few years ago, you wrote a song called Since You Left New York and recorded it as a duet with Debbie. And she
Right.
actually sang it in her own voice, not as Judy
Yeah,
Garland.
that's right.
And so we have you to thank for giving us this recording where we get to hear her sing as herself. I think she's got a magnificent voice
Uh,
as a natural, Debbie
I
Wild.
do too. That's first of all, Sandy Knox, who co-wrote Does He Love You, also co-wrote Since You Left New York. Just a quick aside, when the pandemic started, and we were a couple of months in, Sandy called me and said, "Do you remember that song we wrote many years ago called Since You Left New York?" She wrote it at the time about a real love affair. But she said, listen to the lyric because I think it might really work well because of the pandemic. And it did, because it's like they turned out the lights on Old Broadway. They stopped playing jazz in the cabaret. I heard the plaza closed its doors. All this imagery that worked so well for the year 2020 in New York. But Sandy was the one that said, "There's this girl on YouTube, Debbie Wileman." So I probably would have found her, but Sandy was the one that pushed for us to get together and do this YouTube recording, which I recorded right behind this very same screen, and she recorded in London,
Yeah.
and Sandy had three guys in Nashville create the track. So she's the one that really made it happen. And then just before we leave that, I want to say I agree. She's a fantastic Judy Garland impersonator. And of course, that's what's getting her attention. But I hope that she does not leave her own voice behind, because I think the world deserves, if the Judy Garland thing gets her to a level where she's got a bigger audience, I hope that she always leaves room in her shows to just do some things as herself, because she is pretty remarkable. She really is.
I'm going to send her this interview so that she hears you say
Yeah.
that because I tell her that all the time.
Maybe act one is Judy, and then act two is like, okay, now I'm going to do, I don't know how she does it, because I know she likes to dress. The last few shows, she's dressed up as Judy. So I don't know how she'd handle that. But, maybe she does Judy in act one and then goes off, takes the wig off, puts on her Debbie clothes and comes and does a set as Debbie. Tell her yeah, send this to her.
I absolutely will. I want to ask you about your online performances during the pandemic, which were called Billy's Place, which kept
Mhm.
all of us in good spirits during COVID. Now, if I'm not mistaken, you actually started doing online performances with Linda Lavin even before
Yeah,
Billy's Place, right?
that's right. Yeah, and that was Linda's idea. At the time, Linda had an apartment just 3 floors above me, and we kind of were both stuck here during the pandemic. She was separated from her husband, not legally so. They just were in different places. Steve was in Costa Rica, of all places. Linda was here. They couldn't travel to each other for several months. And about 4 days in to the pandemic, Linda said, we were 6 feet apart, very masked, all that, you know. Uh, but she said, I want to just send out a message on YouTube. I don't even know how you do it. What is it? Facebook? Is it you? How do you do it? I said, well, I think there's a thing called Facebook Live. You could just go live on Facebook. So she got her phone and we did. And then we did one, and then we decided, that was fun. Let's do this every Wednesday. And so we called it a Wednesday matinee. And we did it from her apartment upstairs. And if you watch them, there's no mic. We're just projecting. There's no technical stuff, but we would get dressed up for it. And, we'd spend the day before working out the songs, and we stayed 6 feet apart, you know. And it's just so funny to watch it now. Well, then about 8 weeks into it was tell you what happened. We got into the whole thing with the George Floyd thing and the riots that were happening, the marches, and it got pretty dangerous and weird here in New York, as it did in a lot of big cities. And we were all sad and kind of stunned. And Linda was like, I'm just not feeling it this week. I'm just not sure I want to do it. And so I kind of jumped in and did it. And I did it as a soloist. I didn't want to not do something. And that was a Wednesday afternoon. And then I said to my partner, Doug, I said, well, let's just keep doing this, but let's do it at night. So we picked Thursday night. Yeah. And 65 shows later, it became a thing. Who knew? We sold merchandise. A new CD came out of it. I garnered lots of new friends and fans because, what you don't realize before you start to do it is that now you're actually getting your music out there to people all over the world who can't come to New York to see you. Like, I was reconnecting with people I grew up with in Texas that had never seen me live. And so a lot of good came out of that bad situation, but yeah, Linda Lavin was the first one I did a live stream with.
A lot of good came out of it because you were forced to come up with a totally different hour every week.
Yeah.
I loved the Barry Manilow birthday show. You actually got Barry to call in, which was really special. You also had Melissa Manchester and Lucy Arnaz on the show, which was so cool. You featured a new cocktail every week, which was fun. You kept doing the shows even after the pandemic ended. And it's so nice to be able to thank you publicly for giving us so much great entertainment during that pretty dark time.
Thank you. Well, I share that praise with my partner, Doug Major, who ran the cameras and came up with a lot of those great ideas. I think he was the cocktail idea. And he actually said, that week of Barry's birthday, he said, I wonder if Barry Manilow would call in. Is there any way, and I know Barry, but, as a matter of fact, it's funny because Barry, the last gig I did before the shutdown was in Palm Springs, where he and his husband have a house. So he was actually one of the last people I saw before I flew home and didn't see anybody. But I called up Gary, his husband, and Gary said, what time do you want us to call? And it was 3 hours early. I said, if you call it 5:30 your time, that'll be 8:30 my time. Great. So, I'm sitting here doing the show, and then all of a sudden, on the dot, Doug's across and he holds up the phone and goes, he's on the phone. So I, of course, again, no tech, not even low tech, no tech. I'm holding up the phone next to the mic I'm talking to, and then Doug kind of freaks out. He says, turn the phone around because you can kind of see a phone number up there. So I was like, oh no, yeah. It's just funny, these things that you're making me remember. But Barry was great. He talked with me for 10 minutes. I did a week of Burt Bacharach, and my friend Sue Cameron said, let's get my friend Jackie DeShannon to come on. So I talked to her. I talked to Monica Mancini when I did her father's stuff. Like you mentioned, Lucy. And Linda actually came and did it with me in the room because she was still living upstairs. And by that point, we were, a little closer than 6 feet apart. So it was really fun. The idea of a different show every week, I imposed that on myself because I just wanted to keep it fresh and I wanted to keep people interested. So it became a challenge, but it was fun.
Well, I think that you acquired, even though it wasn't really your intent, you acquired a huge worldwide audience from doing those shows. And kudos to you. You made everybody become your friend. There was an intimacy. We don't all get to go to Bemelman's every Sunday night, but you created this intimacy on those shows, Billy's Place. And of course, the album is wonderful. You've worked with so many incredibly talented vocalists. Is there anybody you haven't worked with yet that you'd like to?
Well, I never worked with Barbra Streisand, and I love her, and I've met her on occasion, and that just never happened. So I guess that's the one I always think of. Doug, my partner, and I actually, but Doug really loves Trisha Yearwood. I think she's fantastic. I would work with her anytime. Kelly Clarkson is another one I think is just amazing, who could sing anything. But yeah, Barbara, and it's a short list, but I'm open to anything. I was a big Linda Eder fan, and now I'm working with her. I was a big Melissa Manchester fan, and now I work with her, and she's a friend. So, I've ticked off a lot of the boxes already.
Well, we recently had the wonderful Nicole Henry on our show.
Oh yeah, great.
And I said to her after we finished filming the interview that I would love the two of you to collaborate on an album. I hope that happens one day.
She's fantastic. That would be great.
I also have this pipe dream, I should just tell you, this dream of you making an entire album with Michael Feinstein. What do you think of that idea?
That's not a bad idea. Actually, I just had dinner with Michael on Christmas Eve, and we, again, obviously we love the same kind of music, and we do laugh a lot. It's funny because I've known we've known each other for many years, and we've kind of circled around each other for a long time. But it's only just kind of in the last couple of years that we've become a little bit closer, spent more social time together. Him being in LA and me being here, it doesn't happen that often, but he has a place about a block away from me when he's in town, and I'm going to see him on New Year's Eve because he's going to be working in the Cafe Carlisle, and I'm going to be working at Bemelman's Bar. So yeah, that's a cute idea. I wouldn't mind doing something like that.
I can see it happening.
The right project.
I can see it happening. The idea came to me when I was at Cast Party last June. He performed. I believe he did a song from The Wizard of Oz.
He did If I Only Had a Brain, and he did all those cute verses that nobody ever hears. He did that full, because the Scarecrow has a separate verse and chorus, so there's four. And he was great. He charmed the audience with that. And he hardly ever gets up to perform at Cast Party. So that was a special time.
That was a lucky night for me. And I sat there thinking, we need an album.
All right.
Co-produced by Billy Stritch and Michael Feinstein. That would be such a fun thing. And for those of our viewers who don't know about Jim Caruso's Cast Party, it takes place every Monday night at Birdland in New York. It's an open mic show. I think it's been going on for at least 20 years. And it's a fun show, really fun show, because you never know who's going to show up and perform. And I believe, Billy, you and Jim have taken the show to other major cities, including London, England, right?
Yeah, we were just in London back in early November, and we're going to go back next year. We go to Las Vegas twice a year. We go to LA at least once a year. We've started going to Minneapolis, just interesting places. So, as Jim says, we'll come to your house and do it if you really want it.
Oh, don't tell me that, or you'll have a booking so quick in Toronto, your head will be spinning.
And it's fun in New York. New York, we've been doing it so long that, there's no lack of singers who show up on a Monday because they know we're there. So we do 2.5 hours, which is quite a night, and generally have like 20 to 25 singers a night. When we go to other cities, of course, we try to secure the talent before we get there through social media. So in London, we did 2 nights and we had about 10 or 12 singers each night, which was great. Of course, in most cities, they don't want a 2.5 hour show. They want a 1.5 hour show. So, but it's great fun to travel. There's great talent everywhere. So, that's one of the things Jim is so great at. He's created something so wonderful as a stepping stone and as a way to present, because everyone's welcome to get up. And I love, playing for someone and giving them that gift of like, they just sang on the stage at Birdland, and we made them sound good, me and my band. So, it's kind of fun, and we've been doing it all these years.
Well, what's really fun for the audience, and I know I'm not the only one that feels this way, these singers show up, they hand you a piece of paper, which we all assume is sheet music or the chart, and you play it as though you've been playing it for years, and you make that piano sound like an entire orchestra. And everybody in the audience is saying, can you believe that he just got that sheet music 2 seconds ago? I don't know that you get how remarkable that is, that while we're listening to the singer, we're watching you play it with all of these flourishes and such a comfort level, and you're getting such enjoyment out of it. We see your face. That is a big part of the show for me, Billy.
Well, good. I'm glad. I really enjoy it when it all comes together like that. It's great. After 20 years of sight reading every Monday, I've gotten pretty good at that. And just as you were saying it, kind of reminded me of, I mean, I guess it's kind of like, you waiting in the waiting room and the doctor comes in and he looks at all this, all this stuff that you would be able to understand and can totally tell you about it and tell, it's like, so I look at these charts and, it's my language. So I know how to do it and actually add what I do on top of it. And then of course I have a great bass player and drummer, so we really give it a full sound. So
I don't
but
know whether you often see the look on the singer's face when you add something, a Billy-ism, to the music that they weren't expecting, and they realize, oh my God, this is so good.
oh, that's cool. Because I'm
Very,
usually
very
behind
cool.
him, so I kind of miss. I don't see it from the front, so I miss a lot of the expressions. But
We know when they're surprised. Now, I
good.
know that Cast Party is not a singing competition, but what do you think of all those singing competition shows like Idol and The Voice and America's Got Talent? Would you ever want to be a judge
I
on one of
like.
those shows?
Well, I liked Idol at the beginning, and then they kind of lost me about 6 or 7 years in. The only one I occasionally watch is The Voice, just because I like the fact that it's based on just what you hear, it's not what you see. I like that gimmick, the chairs are turned, they're just hearing the talent. I think that's kind of cool. But I don't know. I'm not terribly into any of them anymore. I liked it when they were new.
Would you like to be a judge on one of those singing
Oh
competition
yeah, I
shows?
wouldn't say no to that. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm not sure I know so much. Well, never mind. Yeah, I would do that. Yeah,
I
absolutely.
think you do know so much, and I think having you as a judge on one of those shows would be awesome. So, when you look back over the years, are you able to identify the most personally satisfying moment or experience in your career?
That's a tough question. I mean, there's been a lot of great moments along the way. The Grammy, being nominated for a Grammy was terribly gratifying. So many of the travels that I made with with Liza and with other people. I mean, just incredible places. Working last May, being one of the guests in the New York Pops tribute to Barry Manilow at Carnegie Hall. That was the highlight of the year this year, as far as I'm concerned. So, I can't really pinpoint just one.
I think
I
I
mean,
can.
okay, go ahead.
In 2014, you went back to your hometown, Sugarland, Texas, to do a show at the Sugarland Auditorium, and they renamed it the Billy Stritch Stage.
That's one. That's definitely a highlight for
That
sure.
must have been quite an emotional moment for you,
Yes.
Billy.
It's the little auditorium where I did my kindergarten recital, and elementary school, and they totally remodeled it. The building was built in 1918, so it's quite different from the way it was when I grew up. But yeah, they named the stage in my honor, and I always joke because I always say, now kids in the future are going to go in there. They go, now who the heck is Billy Stitch? So anyway, but the day that they dedicated it, it was like my whole life flashed before me. I had some of my kindergarten teachers were there. Miss
Oh,
Bass and Miss Kelly were there, and some of my high school band director, and just the old time. When I grew up in Sugarland, it was an old industry town with a sugar refinery, small town. So a lot of the old timers were there. And so thank you for remembering, for pointing that out. I mean, because that definitely a big high point in my life, and very gratifying for sure.
well, it is for your fans too. Now, in 2004, you wrote the foreword to a wonderful book released called The Liza Minnelli Scrapbook. And it got me wondering, have you ever considered sitting down and writing a memoir about your life and career?
People are asking me that a lot lately. And yeah, it's not out of the question, I mean, because now in this age of Facebook and Instagram, so many, and YouTube, so many things pop back up from years ago, things I forgot about. And I repost these things, and I write these little essays, these few paragraphs to go with it. And I'm pretty good at writing and describing things. And so I'm every time I post something like that, people go, where's the book? I'm waiting for the book. So actually my friend Clea the other night, said, well, I'll help. I think it's better if I had someone to bounce off of, like As Told To, or someone like you to ask me the questions, to draw it out. So I'm not in any rush to do it, but I got some good stories. Yeah. And I think I also have a unique perspective as an accompanist and as a collaborator that a lot of people don't have, and that might be of interest.
Absolutely. And I hope that I have reinforced that for you through this interview with bringing up special moments in your career that would be very interesting to readers. Now, I would imagine that as a working musician for most of your life, one of your big priorities was just to keep the calendar full. But now, at this stage of your life and your career, do you have a strategy or a career plan about what you want to do next? Or do you just take things as they come?
Just keep the calendar full. That's basically it. I don't, I've never been one that have, for better or for worse, I've never been one to have like goals, 6-month goals, year goal, 5 years from now, whatever. Things have happened to me as opposed to me making the things happen. I think part of that is being in the right place and being open to have things happen. But, it helps that I am in New York and I have a reputation, and the phone rings and I get the offers come. But there's no huge, big master plan. Maybe there should be, but there's not. My intent is just to keep doing my best work. I would like to do more songwriting, which is something I haven't been as diligent about in the last dozen years or so. That's something I should do. I would definitely hope to do another recording this year. So starting to plan that. But I think the point is just to keep doing it. It's the only thing I know how to do. If you took it away from me, I don't know what I would do.
Well, nobody's taking it away from you, but here's the shopping list that I came up with.
Okay.
An album with Michael Feinstein, a collaboration with Debbie Wileman so that she sings in her own voice for the second half of her show.
Okay.
A memoir, which may be composed of a whole lot of Facebook posts that will jog your memory, or a visit from Harvey Brownstone to come and draw it all out of you.
Okay.
Another album that you're going to do. I think that'll keep you very, very busy. I want to tell
that's doable.
I want to tell our viewers that you can learn more about Billy Stritch, buy his CDs, and see his concert schedule by going to his official website, billystritch.com.
Yes. And also, I love it when people follow me on Instagram. It's just at Billy Stritch, because that's where I tend to post more fun stuff, just memories and great stuff. And also on Facebook, but I'm paying a little closer attention to Instagram these days. So follow me there.
Yes, everyone. Well, Billy, it's been a real pleasure meeting you and having this chance to talk about your amazing career and body of work. Thank you for all the beautiful music. Thank you for all the support you've given to great artists to make them shine on stage. Thank you for taking the time to appear on our show.
Well, the hour just flew by, man. Thank you so much. And may I thank you for really doing your homework and really asking the really good questions. That's very nice. I appreciate it.
It was easy and it was a pleasure. And please know that you are welcome back on our show anytime, Great. Billy.
Perfect. Happy New Year, Harvey. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Our guest has been the brilliant musician, vocalist, arranger, music director, recording artist, and concert performer, the one and only Billy Stritch. My name is Harvey Brownstone. Thank you to our producer, Steve Silver, my director of programming, Deborah Batsafin, my production assistant, Rosa Puzo, my PR directors, Eileen Shapiro and Jimmy Starr, and my entire team at the XPTV1 network in the UK. Thank you all for joining us. See you next time.
Bye.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out all the great interviews on the Harvey Brownstone Interviews YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified when new videos are posted.